Can you look at this and remember framing from yesterday? Because stuff's been moved around. What's that? Right, well tell me where things ought to be relative to yesterday, because I can tell that stuff's moved. No, I meant yesterday, frame, this, those, today, frame. Have these been moved? Yeah, have these been moved from yesterday?
I can't tell for sure.
Okay.
They look basically the same.
Yeah, they don't. They feel off to me. I can't tell what or why, but they feel off to me.
I think the chairs have been moved. That's one thing.
All right, thanks. As reason. People got reasons for things. Just ask them why they did something. That actually, there's a part of the brain that's known as the interpreter in certain literature that Michael Gazzaniga, who did a study on it, and he's got the neuroscience, and Dr. Martin Seligman, who's a former president of the American Psychological Association, huge body of work, the guy who discovered learned helplessness and learned optimism, found that we need to explain to ourselves why we do what we do, why what happened to us. It's a coherence process. Helps build a sense of continuity in our experience. It happens after the experience, by the way, so that you could be anything at all, really. And the quality of that explanation has a bearing on people's optimism or pessimism. Very interesting work. Learned Optimism is the book. We in NLP are taking a more structural approach. Recall, we're very interested in the grammar, the neurolinguistics here. So if I were to ask someone who, say, had joined a health club in order to get healthy, I have been using a theme of exercise, as a number of you have noted, then I might turn to that person and say, do we have one here who's joined a health club? Yes. And I might ask, why did you choose a health club as a way to get healthy? Well, whatever. Why did you choose a health club?
Just to keep my body going.
Okay. And you said just to keep your body going.
Not to leave my body lazy.
Okay. So what are we hearing there? Keep my body going, not be lazy. We're hearing criteria. And it is, in our assumption in the model, that a person who offers criteria is more likely and more interested in the options that a situation offers. Now, what this is in reason is it's how the person reacts to, interprets the motivational context. That is, that if they're offered choices, they're more willing to get involved and get motivated. If they're told they need to follow a procedure, yes, they'll balk. Yeah, the person will balk. Whereas there are other people that really want a procedure. And once again, because you have self-selected yourselves and you look around and go, I don't know anybody like that, or just one or two, be reminded of the sales call situation. A number of you, just because you're interested in influence, may have studied sales literature where they start to fill out the form and they go, and your name is, and how long you've been alive, and how big is your family, and what's your favorite color, and they start filling in all these things. They got 1, 2, 3, 4 next to them, and they get down towards the end there, and they start going, and what size couch would you like, and how many lamps, and so forth, and then they turn it to you, and there's this almost completed form that's only lacking your signature right below your credit card number, and people who are more procedurally oriented, which, by the way, I've noted could be something I could have more of to get things done. People will look at that, and if they're procedurally oriented, they'll be drawn to sign it, to get closure. There are certain seminar trainings in the United States, rather famous ones, that when you are concluding the seminar, they say, look under your seat. And under their seat, there'll be an almost completed form. Once again, ticking off the different steps that they need to go through, and of course, needing a credit card number and a signature. The other thing is that people who are procedural, if they can get a step or two, they get going in terms of motivation, and this is very useful. Now, these we consider meta-programs because it's sequence versus sort of a random sense of criteria. When I asked you just now, you brought up an important criteria, you brought up another important criteria. You weren't putting them in any particular order. And so it's an ordering principle in the neurology, whether the person is drawn to sequential order or whether they're more drawn, therefore, to the different kinds of criteria and values that would motivate them. You can hear this in Tony Robbins' work when he says, you'll do something when you get enough reasons. And what is he telling us? He's telling us when you list enough criteria, and that criteria can be, my family will see me as a healthier person and they'll eat healthier. You know, my sister might start exercising and might start taking better care of herself. I'll live longer. I'll have better sex. You know, there's whatever it is, the person gets enough criteria that they what? Remember what we're doing here with a motivation strategy. It's a threshold. They're cranking it up with each criteria until, boom, they go. Now, someone who's more procedural or both, you'll find they need enough criteria, and then they need to know how to get into the process. And for them, they'll want more order. In fact, the person, if they are procedural and is watching this tape, engaging in this with me, will be somewhat frustrated by my apparent lack of procedure. And not because I don't have one. I have a very specific, I was asked that, a very specific plan in terms of a lot of conceptualization going towards practice. So when we get done here, it's total practice. And I'm not doing this. Let me remind you that the questions you're being offered were formulated by Ross Stewart and Roger Bailey to interview people in a business context to rapidly elicit the information without having the person go through this extensive a training process. They're there in the person's nonverbals and in their verbals all along. You start talking to the person about, okay, you want to be motivated to be healthier and so forth, and you know, and, oh, yeah, I'm having difficulty in this one area, and well, what is that area? And they go, well, you know, I've joined a club, I've joined some people, we're exercising, but you know, I'm just not getting with it. Motivation problem. Because after all, remember, motivation strategies are running all the time as well, and if you're motivated, you don't notice it. Well, you will after this. So the person begins to talk about this. And they might say something like, I don't know the first thing to do. Ah, self-help books, lists, things you fill out. So this is the reason this is considered both a meta-program and is included in motivation. And once again, it's one of those curious high comedy things is that if you're options-oriented, that you would want to offer the person lots of options. And they're going, I just want to know what I need to do. And they start showing you stuff, behavior like this, then you don't need to ask the question, why did you choose this particular format, this particular way of doing this? You've seen it. On the other hand, you could ask, how did you choose? And what does how did you choose lead the person to pay more attention to? Remember, even the words you're using in the question lead people. A why question, for the most part, although there is an ambiguity there, because why both can be to criteria, to values, why can be to prior causation, which is where you get the procedures, and why can be throw me a bone because I'm unhappy with what you did. Like, why did you do that? So there's an ambiguous response, and you're playing off the ambiguity. And the person chooses the one that fits for them. That's why we get away with why. We banned why from the practitioner because there was so much else to learn. We didn't want to bother you with the fact that why has ambiguity in it. It's just like, this is one more thing to remember along with the 14 meta-model questions and so forth. It's like, so we don't do that. Well, that's right. We don't even teach all 14 anymore. We teach about 7. Once again, it's too much to handle. So now we bring that up. That you ask, but if you ask how, let's take how. How did you choose this approach, to motivate yourself, this approach to get healthy? Remember, you tie these together. Person has made a decision, say, to be healthier in their life. That's the context. And they go over here and they start talking about their motivation in that context. They start telling you what they're doing. And you go, well, how did you choose that? Once again, your question leads them to procedures this time, but they may answer, well, you know, I was feeling tired in the morning, and my spouse was saying I'm getting a little thick through here. She's starting to pat it in the morning, and it's not as friendly as it used to be, and you know, and so on and so on. What am I doing? Criteria. Right. People will answer out of their model of the world. So is that clear? Sure enough.
Sometimes I am option-oriented and sometimes I'm procedure.
Oh, we all hope we are. Yeah. Remember, my premise in all this is that metaprograms are a way of describing a map of possibilities that most people, it's that old thing about the world is a banquet and most people are starving. You know, that there's this whole banquet of possibilities. There's all these capabilities. If you can do both of those, and you can put yourself in a process and zoom through those parts of life that are procedural, then you don't have to be motivating yourself. You just get up and you do it. This is what these morning habits are. These people that do get up early in the morning and they have like a ritual, they do have a ritual. They have a procedure that they get into the day, and then by the time they've completed the ritual, the procedure, they're present, they're awake, and their clothes are on straight. You know? Other people, they're getting up in the morning and they're going, you know, I should have decided what I was going to wear last night. Because they're looking at the options and the clock is running. That's motivation as well, right? As time decreases, some people get more motivated. And so they're trying to pick it. It's a misapplication, right? In some areas of life, procedures are wonderful things to have. In other areas of life, it's really helpful to know why, what's important about what you're engaging in. Michael.
Two questions.
Yeah.
The very first one, isn't it right that leader programs are context dependent? And the other, if so, could it be kind of tricky if you have a person assessed as an option person who is in another context procedural?
Okay, two things about that. The first is that people do have degrees of these patterns in their lives somewhere regardless. Making coffee, for example, is a very short sequence. There is a procedure. If you don't follow it, you don't get coffee. You put the coffee in the wrong place, the water in the wrong place. It's always bothered me. It's like I have to make my coffee to wake up, but I'm not awake enough to make my coffee, kind of thing. Yeah. So that's first point. We all have these in different contexts. That was what was so interesting about what Ross and Roger were doing, and Shelley in expanding their work, is being able to capture a business context, capture a particular context, and ask about that. Because that's what you want to ask about. You want to find out in that context. People can be different, although they aren't as much as they could be. I keep coming back to that. People could have more diversity and differentiation of metaprograms. They don't tend to. The other part of that, and I bring this up, the concern you raise, is that there are certain kinds of tests that you can, like paper and pencil tests that you can do, tests online that you can do. Think of this a moment. What the person is likely to be doing, unless you spend a lot of effort in the test design, is giving you their metaprogram leanings for taking tests. Right? Because that's what they're engaged in. Whereas engaging in a actual work project would be different. Now, I bring that up to you so you would notice, if you decide to use these in modeling and elicitation, is that what you want to do is put the person in the context in which you're interested in. And of course, we know from language patterning that you'd want to talk about that past situation and then vivify it and then talk about the person as if they're in that situation this moment, as if it's happening right now. And then say, I have a few questions for you. And of course, when they're beginning to talk in that situation, the work context, the creativity context, the leisure context, whatever it is, and as richly real and specific as you can. Like, what's a specific project you're working on? What is something you're actually involved with now? or you have remember from before, and what was it like that morning? So the person isn't making it up, because they'll use language like, it could be. You hear language like, well, it could be, and you know at that point that they're somewhat meta to their experience, and you want to draw them back in. When you're interacting with a person live, you have that capability. That's my concern about pencil and paper tests or internet tests. I think there can be a lot of value coming out of those. But I wonder a little bit. That's, Michael, this is still to you. I don't know. We don't know yet about that. You know, how well that is the test the person writes representative of them at work. What we really need to do is hire some people and go do both, right? Have them take the test and then go meet them at work and then compare the results. Given that NLP is not an experimental field, and given that it's not a research field specifically, we haven't designed those kinds of tests. All right? And for your purposes, there may not make a difference, because you actually do see the people, meet with the people. Yeah. So you put them in the context, and you get the specific situation that you're interested in. If we did this as a complete process, you've asked the parts about the decision. Now you're at the point of motivation, asking about motivation. And then you say, in that situation, the one that you asked them about. So tell me about a situation or a decision you're really pleased with, if you want to elicit what they're good at, or something in your work that's important to you. Now, what was important in that situation? What were you paying attention to? What's important about that? You're getting the values. The question, what will having that do for you for each of those where the implicit message in the criteria doesn't let you know? If they say relax, you know it's away from. If they said, I want to gain, you know it's towards, and so forth. If they say something else like satisfaction, you need to ask, what will having that do for you? You're listening at the same time to the sentence structure. How long between I and then modifying words and the verb? The more distance, the more reactive. The less distance, the more proactive. And again, one sentence does not make a pattern. You want to get some bit of conversation with them, some bit of their writing, internet, whatever that lets you begin to see this come out. You're also listening for, what are they doing when they make comparisons? Are they noticing the sameness of something? Are they noticing that it's more or less? Are they noticing differences? There's another possibility, and that's polarity response. As I understand, very popular among youthful teenagers and certain adults. It's not that common a response, just a few percentage points among people, but if you get a sense that the person is contrary, as they would say in ordinary language, you can always test for it by using the Erickson pattern, don't you? So you say whatever it is that you want to say, you pause, and you say, don't you? And they will flip their response. That, or you can just contrary your own response. You can say the opposite to them. So they say, so something like, so you like exercise? And they'll go, no, I don't. And then I could say, so you like exercise, don't you? Or I could say, when they say, no, I don't, I could go, so you don't like exercise? And they'll say, yes, I do. All right. Then you know you've got a polarity response. Fairly easy to test for. As I say, very small percentage of people that have this, but you kind of get, they seem like they're always disagreeing. This is different than, by the way, counterexampling, which is something that I do. Counterexampling is just more difference, but I can agree. A counterexampler will find the bit of the chair turned the other way. The counterexampler will find the details that are different. That's looking for difference. But if you say the opposite to them, they won't flip. They'll say, yeah, well, that's still the difference there. Reason, steps, or steps, or steps, or criteria. Can we do both? Someday, I hope. And a number of people do. And when you're modeling, you want to pay particular attention to that. There may be a sequence. For example, some of you have already noticed that some people will find out what they don't want and then what they do want. And I'll pause on that for just a moment and say, now we're getting to the point where you understand the difficulty you had with certain individuals after your practitioner training when you went out in the real world and were endeavoring to get outcomes from them, right? So what do you want, you said in your best NLP voice, all ready to help them write it down and make it well-formed. And they said, well, I don't want this, and I don't want that, and I don't want that, and I don't want that. And you go, okay. And you look through your notes trying to figure out, what do I do now? Because that wasn't in the practitioner training. And then you go, what do you want? And they go, well, I don't want that, and I don't want that, and I don't want that, and I don't want that. And then we have the John Grinder approach. Hey, Didu, what do you want? Well, now you realize that as a way of sorting the world, as a way of paying attention to experience, they're very well developed here. Now, we know from before, and go back to a previous diagram, we know that they go toward food at some point, or they wouldn't be alive. And we know that they go toward certain kinds of pleasurable experiences, or they wouldn't be alive. I mean, even if it's just like holding the clicker, television, even if it's that, there's some physical level on which they do know what they want. It's just it's so short term, and it's so near term and present that it's not giving them a direction in life. So what you can do is you start with their away from. So you don't want this, and you don't want this, and you don't want this, and you don't want this. And not wanting those things, what do you think of wanting? And now you're helping them build a strategy as well. Now, I'm bringing this up for a couple reasons. One, for that. The other is that you'll often find that professionals in high-risk fields, at least I found this with financial decision makers, traders, people like that, they have to do both. The idea being the gung-ho cowboy, master of the universe kind of trader with the suspenders and all, it's just throwing money around. Yeah, these guys, they bring banks down. The guys that make money and the gals that make money are people who have a well-developed sense of what they want. They want that money. They want that acclaim. They want to do that. They want to be in the big game. And they're also well-developed in their away from. They've got them organized. So this is to say, pay attention. If you hear both sides of something, you go, oh, this person's got a bit of room to move. They've got some skills here. It's worth discovering what does that allow them to do. So let's get started. An exercise. My suggestion, given our day-to-day, we'll be going more and more towards change processes, is that you find a place in your life where you motivate yourself, where there was a little bit of difficulty, some difficulty. In other words, it was something where you noticed your motivation strategy, and it worked well to motivate you, not by physical cost, not by, and after I whipped myself on the back and all that, and then I went and did it. But rather where you said, well, need to motivate myself, and you did, and you felt good about it, and you were physically good about it, that's a resource that you could apply to other places in your life where you find you have motivation difficulty, because then you can find it in the difficult situations what it is you're doing, and you might be surprised or not so surprised to find out that some of the meta programs are different, right? But one at a time. So for your own use later in the day, I suggest that you take a situation where it was important to motivate yourself, and you did so in a way that you're pleased with, and that way you'll have that for use later on. Okay? That means what? You got to find a context, right? There is content. You want to find that context where you did that. Maybe it was to go back to school. Maybe it was to complete a project. Maybe it was to paint the house. I don't really care what it was. But you want to get specific about that. So you really do have values and criteria that apply to that situation. You really do have that visceral response of motivating yourself and whatever you did. And the person can actually speak with their own language associated and get high quality information. All right? Questions? The other day, I said something about look around and find someone you're attracted to or repelled from. Just don't tell them which one they are. This is the kind of stuff in NLP that the more the person is different from you, the more curious you want to be. Because as I'm letting you know again and again, that difference from you is built up out of their model of the world biases, which are made of meta-programs. Those are the people that are going to be able to do stuff you aren't able to do, because their world, their model of the world is actually different. So mix it up today. If you haven't worked with somebody for whatever reason, maybe it's because you're too attracted to them. I don't care. You want to mix it up and work with people that you don't work with as much, because you want to find out, what could I learn there? All right? Groups of 3, about 20 minutes for this, and come on back.